Hello guys and welcome to episode 67 of the Beat Your Backlog podcast, a podcast discussing the thing gamers like to put off, get to another day, and oh yes, will definitely beat later, their backlog. I'm your host Adam, and today we are taking a trip down memory lane and kind of a nostalgia lane as we play 2007's Pokémon Ranger. And when Pokémon Ranger was released in Europe back in 2007, it actually convinced me to buy a Nintendo DS Lite, because up until that point I'd really kind of dropped out of my Pokemon addiction. The last games I'd played were Pokemon Ruby and Pokemon Sapphire, so when I bought Pokemon Ranger, I actually had no idea that it wasn't a mainline Pokemon game but a spin-off in the franchise. And I can actually remember being in the supermarket back in the days where the supermarkets in Britain sold video games, because I don't think they do that anymore. But I remember seeing the box and seeing the box art and thinking, this is unusual. It doesn't look like the typical kind of layout template that a Pokemon game would have. Also, there was only one version of the game, so I was like, okay, that's also different. Really, didn't put one and one together and realize that this game isn't a mainline game, but it's something different. So I was a little bit shocked when I got the game home, put it in my DS and started playing it for the first time. Because it turns out that the game was not made by Game Freak, but was instead developed by Creatures Inc. and the legendary HAL Laboratory, which I also didn't know or didn't remember until I booted up the game again as I played it this time around. If you don't know HAL Laboratory, they are the company behind very small and obscure indie titles like Kirby's Dream Land, Kirby's Adventure, Super Smash Bros, Super Smash Bros Melee, and interestingly, which I also didn't know until I was researching this review, they made Pokemon Snap and Pokemon Pinball. And if you didn't realize that, I'm being very ironic. HAL Laboratories is like one of the jewels of Nintendo. They're always making massive Nintendo games like Super Smash Bros Melee, and they also make some other smaller titles themselves, but yeah, they are very well known within the Nintendo kind of universe, I would say. And as we'll get into, the gameplay in Pokemon Ranger is very different, to say the least. I never actually finished the game back in 2007 because I was craving a more traditional Pokemon experience and eventually moved on to Pokemon Diamond, but I had always wanted to go back to beat it eventually. And now, thanks to my wonderful Discord community who voted for me to play Pokemon Ranger from my backlog, I finally got to play it in 2025, 18 years after its initial release, which just makes me feel ancient. So what is Pokemon Ranger? What makes it so different from a traditional Pokemon game? And is it worth your time and your money to go back and play it? Let's find out in this week's episode of the Beat Your Backlog podcast. But as always, before we get into the episode, I would like to remind you that you can support the podcast on Patreon. If you do, you will gain access to all of my content 24 hours early, and you will unlock the Beat Your Backlog bonus vault, which is starting to be filled up with exclusive podcast episodes for Patreon supporters only. If you listen to this podcast around the release date in May, or when I released it, May's episode in the bonus vault will be about Pokemon. It is about me ranking all of the mainline games from S rank to D rank. So if this episode has kind of got you hungry for more Pokemon content, do consider becoming a Patreon at the $2 or $5 tier, and also listening or watching that video as well. So if you're interested in supporting my one-man show, head over to patreon.com/beatyourbacklog or click on the link in the description of this episode. Thank you as always to my Patreon supporters, and also thank you for the recent free supporters on Patreon. I really appreciate the people that I've been following for free too, because that really helps. So thank you, and that is an option as well. You won't get any of the content early or any of the exclusive content, but as soon as my content goes live, you will get an email or a notification via Patreon for it. So if supporting monetarily isn't an option right now, supporting for free is great too. So thank you to all of my free supporters too. So let's get into the review, and as always, we'll start off with the story, and it does start in a very typical Pokemon way where you get to choose whether you play as a boy or a girl. And I was going to say in a kind of modern version of Pokemon that you get to choose as that you're a boy or a girl, but I mean we've been doing that since Ruby and Sapphire, which are like 20 years old now, so it's not really modern in that respect. But yeah, pretty much from the very get-go, you can tell that we're not in Kanto anymore, because the character sprites look very different. Instead of holding a Pokeball, you're holding a weird-looking stick thing. And after choosing your character, you arrive by boat in Fall City, which is the capital of the Fiora region. And upon your arrival, you're told to report to the local ranger base, where the leader of the Rangers, Spencer, is expecting you. It turns out you and Spencer have been exchanging letters for a few months, and you've finally convinced him to take you on as a ranger apprentice. After completing a couple of tutorial missions, you're introduced to Professor Hastings, who is a genius engineer and the creator of the Captor Stylus, which is the Styler, I should say, not Stylus, the Captor Styler, which is the weird stick device I mentioned earlier, which you can use to capture Pokemon. Spencer assigns you your first mission, which is to escort Professor Hastings from the nearby town of Ringtown back to Fall City, and along the way you're actually ambushed by the game's villainous team, the Go-Rock Squad, who steal the Professor's new secret styler prototype, the Super Styler, and get away with it. With the Super Styler in their hands, the Go-Rock Squad can capture any Pokemon they want without forming the bond that occurs between a Ranger and a Pokemon by doing a proper capture. And because of this, Spencer and the other Rangers of Fior are worried that the Go-Rock Squad will use the Super Styler to bend Pokemon to their will and exploit their power. So Spencer sends you out, even though you're just an apprentice, along with your new partner Pokemon Minun, to track down the Go-Rock Squad, retrieve the Super Styler, and put an end to their evil plans. And yeah, for what it was with Pokemon, like, I'm not necessarily a person that gets really into Pokemon stories. I think most of them are kind of, they're just there and they get you through the game. But it was kind of nice to be in a different sort of game where the story was a little bit different, where it didn't really revolve around you beating 8 gym leaders to then go to the Pokemon League. It is a very Pokemon in a sense of, like, for whatever reason, these people want to destroy the Earth, and they will involve legendary Pokemon to do that. But I did like that the Ranger leaders were quite involved in the story. It reminded me of Pokemon White in a lot of ways. That way is how the gym leaders are so involved in the story there. And yeah, I really liked how the gym leaders sort of were themed around their town. So especially one called Cameron, who lives in a place called Summerland, which you can imagine is like it reminds me of like one of these amazing hotels in the Seychelles where your room is basically just like a straw hut in the middle of the ocean. That's what the town looks like. And he's just a guy there that purposely wanted to be sent there so he can just go surfing and chill out every single day. And so I can really like I can kind of relate to Cameron on that level, that he's just on holiday, a permanent holiday in his tropical city. I also quite like the Go-Rock Squad. I think as an evil team, they weren't that evil, but I think they did have interesting villains, because there was 4 of them who were all musicians in a band, and they each played their own instruments during their kind of intro scenes. It really reminded me of the Pokemon anime where you had Jesse and James from Team Rocket like having this intro song. They also had that too, where if you just played against them individually, they just played their instrument, but there's one bit where you fight against them all together, or they're all there together, and each of them plays a different instrument in the song. And it's quite like a clever way to involve that anime kind of aspect into the game, which was cool. And I also thought their leader Gordo is pretty intimidating, especially when you first meet him whilst rescuing him from Lyra Forest. But yeah, so the story is like I said, but it's mostly just another Pokemon story that is, again, revolves around these people for whatever reason wanting to destroy the world, and again, like it ends up with you having to take on legendaries that they have captured to stop them doing it. But yeah, it was fine. One thing is clear though is that again, like I said in the intro, is that this game is not your daddy's Pokemon, or your granddaddy's Pokemon, I should say. So though the story loosely follows a simpler template to the mainline Pokemon games, the gameplay of Pokemon Ranger really does not. So there are no turn-based battles in the game, there is no capturing Pokemon in Pokeballs, there's no gyms to beat, there's no leveling up. Instead, you capture Pokemons in like a one-on-one battle using your physical DS stylus, so you have to have the stylus. And what happens is the Pokemon appears on the bottom screen of the DS, and you have to draw continuous circles around it until they're caught. And depending on the Pokemon, each Pokemon needs a different number of circles to be drawn to be captured. So the easy Pokemon maybe only need 2, so you just have to quickly draw two circles around it. The harder ones need between like 10 and 20. So obviously then you have to think of ways that you can quickly draw those circles around them. And it does sound quite easy, right? Well, yeah, the only problem is that the Pokemon move around and they can also attack. And if their attack hits your stylus line, so if you're drawing a circle and they walk into it or their attack hits it, it basically cancels your capture attempt. And if they attack it, they will do damage to your styler. And if you take too much damage in a battle, it's basically game over. To help you out, you can call on your partner Pokemon Minun. as well as other Pokemon you've captured. And what Minun will do, he's always with you. And I think it's interesting. It kind of shows a sign of the times that, like, you know, Minun, and if you play as a guy, you get Minun. If you play as a girl, you get Plusle. It's a sign of the times where it's like, okay, and I guess Pokemon still does it now, where they're like, all right, we need to have our kind of Pikachu looking character. So yeah, okay, we have Plusle and Minun. Okay, they can be the main characters in this game. I'm like, why? Like, they're some of the most forgetful Pokemon ever, I would say, Minun and Plusle. Even in Ruby and Sapphire, there's like one area where you catch them, and they just seem to be like a bit of a kind of quirk of like, oh, here is a dual battle where you have both of them. But yeah, so Minun is your partner Pokemon. He stays with you throughout the entire game, and yeah, you can bring him into battles, and what he does is he shoots out lightning in different directions, and if it hits the Pokemon that you're trying to catch, it basically paralyzes them for a few seconds, which means that they won't be able to move, and then that means for you it's easier to just draw your circles around them. But depending on the type of the Pokemon you summon to help you, their abilities will have different effects in the battle. So here are a few examples. So if you have a water type Pokemon, basically what you need to do is you hold down the stylus on the screen, and it will start creating a bubble which like slowly expands. And then when you get it to a size where you think it's big enough to capture the Pokemon you're trying to capture, you have to flick the stylus, which will flick the bubble in the direction of the Pokemon. Then if it hits the Pokemon gets enveloped in the bubble, and then again it stops them moving so you can draw around them. If you have a grass type Pokemon, you can basically draw lines on your screen which will create tall grass. And if you draw it into a Pokemon, the Pokemon will basically get ensnared in the tall grass, holding it in place, or at least slowing it down. So again, then you can draw quickly circles around it. If you take the fighting type move, this one was one of my favorites actually. It actually reduces the number of circles you need to capture a Pokemon. So if, let's say, a Pokemon needs 10 circles to capture it, using a fighting type will means you'll only need to draw 8 with its boost. So that was quite helpful to have in some of the harder battles, because you need only 80% of the circles you would usually need to draw. And it's cool because there are a lot of different unique effects depending on the types, but to be honest, most of them just boil down to freezing the enemy in place to give you a window to complete your capture. And when you capture a Pokemon, it temporarily joins your party, and your party can grow up to 7 Pokemon plus Minun. So that's also different from the mainline game where you always have 6 Pokemon. Here you can have up to 8. And as you explore Fiora, you'll encounter obstacles like wire fences or boulders that require Pokemon with specific field moves to clear them. So these are a bit like the HM obstacles in the traditional Pokemon games, but instead of getting the move and training it to a random Pokemon, it's that you need specific Pokemons to break these obstacles. And I was actually quite surprised by the variety of the field moves, and that while most when you needed them, the Pokemon that had the field move would be in an area like around the area of the obstacle. So it was kind of like, I need a Pokemon with the slash field move to get through this fence, and you kind of just move down to the next panel, like the next window in the game, and it's like, there's a Meowth that has it. Okay, cool, I'll just capture him, use him, and then continue. But there was some areas where it wasn't like that. Like you might be in an area that you need, there's a big rock in the way, and you need a rock type to smash the boulder, but there was no rock type to be found. So I quite like that there was some sort of backtracking where you had to be like, okay, I know I can come back to here later. I need to go and find the rock type maybe further on in the game or back from where you came from and bring it here, smash it, and then that might unlock some kind of additional, I don't know, rarer Pokemon that you could capture that will help you out in a battle later on. But yeah, however, once you've used your Pokemon's battle ability or its field move, it then gets released. So unlike the mainline games, there's, like I said, there's no leveling up, there's no evolving, there's no building teams. You don't keep Pokemon at all. Even if you don't use a Pokemon, once you leave an area, they will all be released because you can't take them out of their natural habitat. So it's very much like, it's a very obvious and big departure from the traditional Pokemon formula. And at first it wasn't something that I didn't really like it, because I think building up and evolving the Pokemon and thinking about the sort of the how you build your team out and how you balance, like, okay, what types do I need going through the game to make sure that I don't really have a weakness is something I like, and did quite miss it initially, because it felt like a bit like the heart of Pokemon was gone. But on the other hand, it was quite refreshing to be able to catch and use so many different Pokemon. I was also really surprised that like one of the first Pokemon you can catch is a Chikorita, which is like, a starter Pokemon from Gen 2. And it's just something that until recently, like with Scarlet and Violet, and I think Sword and Shield, but I can't remember. But yeah, Pokemon traditionally you could never capture the starters. You always had to trade them. So it was the first time it's literally like the first area you walk into. You're like, oh my god, there's a Chikorita there, and then later you see a Mudkip and a Torchic and Cyndaquil and Bulbasaur and whatever, and you're like, oh, it does feel very refreshing to be like, oh cool, I can just capture these Pokemon. And you can also, as you progress, you can capture fully evolved Pokemon. So like you can capture a Golem, a Gengar, a Machamp, a Charizard, which also feels really cool because it's not something that you can typically do in a Pokemon game. So in the end, I was like, okay, it's quite nice to be able to just have these different Pokemon that follow you, have these different field moves, and then they eventually release and you move on and you can capture something else. And yeah, so while Pokemon Ranger's progression system is a big shift from the mainline game, I ultimately thought it was a good one for this game. It felt refreshing. It was something different. It wasn't just a standard Pokemon sort of template, and it also sort of got me out of the I would say like the rhythm of playing Pokemon games, because usually when I play a Pokemon game, I always play it whilst I'm doing something else. So like maybe I'm watching TV or listening to a podcast or listening to music, because they're games where I usually turn my brain off and it's just a lot of spamming A, because I'm like, all right, just get through the fight. Yeah, okay, whatever. Go to the next area, spam through the dialogue, spam through the next fight, and so on and so on. But this game was very much like, no, you need to pay a bit more attention. You need to be involved because the battles are so sort of physical in a way, because you're physically drawing these circles and paying attention. So I think also changing up the sort of party system helped with that too. And as I said, you can capture a Charizard, and speaking of Charizards, at times Pokemon Ranger can be a very difficult and frustrating game to play. And when I told members of the Beat Your Backlog Discord community that I was playing Pokemon Ranger, a few of them shared childhood stories about nearly breaking their DS screens whilst furiously trying to draw circles to try and capture the Pokemon. And until I came up against the Charizard, I didn't really understand why this was remembered for being such a hard game. But oh boy, did I soon find out, because it's not that necessarily the battle with Charizard is inherently hard. It's that you have to sit through like 5 minutes of dialogue with the Go-Rock squad before every attempt. So if Charizard defeats you, you're forced to go back to the previous save point, go through the unskippable dialogue over and over again, which makes the difficult battle feel even more frustrating, because you're like, okay, I'm not just straight back into the battle. I'm having to just skip through all of this dialogue over and over. And in the fight itself, Charizard launches fireballs that basically stick on the screen. So he has them in like two patterns. But they land and basically they block the areas where you would usually draw around him. And if your stylus line touches one, you take quite a lot of damage. So if you touch it a couple of times, you're dead pretty quickly. And the worst part is that there's never a point in the battle where there are no fireballs on the screen. So it will be like wave 1 will spawn, and then they will sort of fade out, but at the same time, wave 2 will then spawn again. So there's never really any point where fireballs aren't on the screen, which makes it very hard to draw circles around it, around Charizard. And my first strategy was to just try, like I've been doing for the entire game, just try and draw as many circles as fast as possible, like getting like cramp in my wrists, because I was just doing it as quick as I could. The problem with that was, and why it didn't work, was one, the fireballs, there's not a lot of space to draw circles because of the fireballs, and if you hit them, you take damage. And the other one was that Charizard moves around constantly, and his hitboxes of Charizard, the fireballs, and also your stylus line are a little bit finicky. So there was times where Charizard might be near a fireball, and I'd be like, okay, I can fit my stylus line through there, but the hitbox would hit the fireball and you take damage and it would break your capture attempt. So that was also very frustrating. And the more frustrating thing again was knowing that if I failed, I would have to sit through all of the dialogue and the cutscenes again. And that was made even worse because just before the Charizard fight, there was another big fight with a Gyarados where I'd used up Minon's energy. So like basically how it works with Minon is the more circles you draw and more captures you do, it levels, it fills up like a gauge. And once the gauge has, I think at the end of the game, it has like 5 different levels to it. And once you fill it up, that gives you like the highest, like the most potent attack that Minon can do, and it will make enemies be paralyzed for longer. And I'd used up all of his attack power in the Gyarados fight, so I had no attack power to basically freeze the Charizard in place. Because I thought my original idea was, okay, I should just paralyze him before he can shoot the fireballs into the air and then just capture him quickly. But because I didn't have any power for Minon, I couldn't paralyze him before he shoots the fireballs. So that didn't work either. So after slamming my head on the wall for literally a couple of evenings, like I was really like trying this fight for, I wasn't playing for very long because it was frustrating, but it took me like 3 or 4 nights to actually eventually beat Charizard. I looked up a let's play because I was like, maybe there's something I'm missing, like maybe there's like a Pokemon in this cave area where I was that I need to go and catch first, or if there's just some trick to it. And it does turns out that there was a trick to it, and as with many things in life, the trick was not to go as fast as possible, but instead to slow down, which was something that I'd not done at all during the game. So what would happen is I would just basically draw very slow, deliberate circles, like draw around the fireballs, and just more or less, as long as you kept the stylo on the screen and were making circles in relatively quick successions, like within a couple of seconds, your stylus line would stay on the screen. So you could draw around the fireballs and around Charizard, do one circle, then wait for him to move, do another circle, and move and do another, and then eventually, when an opportunity came up, you could draw a few quick circles, and that would get him down. And I saw immediate results, like I basically got him down to just one circle remaining, like a few times before he broke my combo again. But that gave me like the encouragement to be like, okay, it's doable. You can beat him. Like, it's not impossible to do it. And eventually I did catch him and could finally progress and finish the game. But it was a very, very frustrating part of the experience. And I now completely understand how some people nearly broke their DS screens trying to catch this damn Charizard. And the other big difference, I guess, with this game, with Pokemon Ranger, is the visuals, because they are quite different from any other Pokemon title up until this point, with this, at least the pixel art era of Pokemon. But I do think the visuals really help set the game apart, because it's still top down, but your character and Pokemon sprites are drawn at like an isometric angle. So it gives the game an unusual but not unappealing perspective, because everything that sort of the landscape is top down, but the way that your character stands on it, he's always stood at like a side on angle, and all of the Pokemon are as well. It's not like he's facing in like north, south, east, or west. It's always like he's facing northeast, southeast, northwest, or southwest. So a bit of a change up there. But yeah, I think, and also that your character has more realistic proportions. So it's not the chibi, like big head, small body of the traditional games up until this point. He has more kind of human-like proportions. And I have to say, I actually think I prefer the art style in Pokemon Ranger. Like, sure, there are some parts of the art that, like, some of the textures in the landscape or some of the architecture in certain towns does feel very low budget. Like, the towns feel very empty, and like, there's like four buildings in them with like a very flat like landscape. Like, there's no topography or anything. The most interesting one is the Summerland, like I said, with like the little straw huts. So they do feel a bit cheaper, like a little bit low budget compared to the original game. But I do think the Pokemon and the characters designs more than make up for that. I think they look way better than any of the other games until this point. I also really appreciate like the 4 settlements in the game felt unique. Like, Fall City it has its like bustling harbour. Summerland is filled with beaches and straw huts. Windtown is snowy and icy, and with the characters there, they're very cold to kind of match that. And I know this sort of like thematic town design is pretty standard in Pokemon games, but it just felt very especially clear here and well executed. There were only 4 towns. There was 4 very simple and distinct vibes to them, and it was easy to kind of remember who was where and where I needed to go. Another pleasant surprise was the music. I think the music in this game is really high quality too. It's very upbeat, whimsical, and just as catchy as anything you hear in the mainline series. Honestly, I think if you close your eyes and listen to it, you'd be mistaken. You'd mistake it for music from Pokemon White or one of the other mainline entries, because it has a very standout soundtrack. And yeah, it's a very different game. It's very much like it is a spin-off in that respect, but I think it's a very well polished, high quality one. Like, it's not like the I would say it's on like the level with Mystery Dungeons in spin-off. Like, it's definitely worth playing. It feels really good quality. It's not like kind of the spin-offs of like these random Pokemon pinball games or sports games or whatever. It's definitely levels above that. But that then leads us to the question, should you play Pokemon Ranger in 2025? And if you are a Pokemon connoisseur who has played all of the mainline games and wants to explore a different corner of the franchise, Pokemon Ranger is well worth checking out. However, if you're just curious about it after reading this review, I'd actually recommend watching a Let's Play instead of tracking down a physical copy. It's a fascinating slice of Pokemon history, the stylus-based capture mechanic, the involvement of HAL Laboratory, the unique visuals, and the distinct gameplay loop all combine into something truly one of a kind. It's still a good-looking game nearly 2 decades later, it has a great soundtrack, and it completely flips the traditional Pokemon formula on its head. That said, after playing around 11 hours, I don't really feel compelled to dive back into the post-story content or check out the other Pokemon Ranger games in the series, at least not right now. So yeah, it's fun going back and playing it, but like if you don't own the game or own a Nintendo DS Lite, it's not really worth, I would say, going through the hassle of getting a DS and getting the game to play through it again. I would suggest looking up some Let's Plays. There's lots of ones on YouTube, and yeah, I mean, I think the game to buy is relatively cheap compared to other Pokemon games secondhand, because Pokemon games, their prices are just they just skyrocket for a lot of them. I recently rebought Pokemon White, and that was very expensive, and also White 2 was very expensive too. So I wouldn't bother going back. I don't think you need to do it. It might be worth getting one of the 3DS games, because they're probably easy to get hold of and probably a bit cheaper, and maybe the gameplay feels a bit more refined than the original. But yeah, like I said, I don't feel like I want to go back and play it or play any of the other games. I would rather play a mainline game. Like I have Pokemon White 2 kind of sat on my backlog to play. I'd rather play that, or even go back and play even like Pokemon MMO. Like, I know it's not an official game, but I'd like to go back and re-experience Leaf Green or Fire Red that way than play another Pokemon Ranger game. But yeah, guys, that has been episode 67 of the Beat Your Backlog podcast. Thank you so much for listening. And I would really love to know if you also played Pokemon Ranger, and if you also have a story about how it almost broke your DS screen. Do you remember fighting the Charizard and it being a pain? Were there other Pokemon in the series that you thought that were pains to beat? Please do let me know. If you're listening to the podcast on Spotify, you can let me know by commenting on the episode. And if you're listening elsewhere, let me know on social media by @ing me on Blue Sky. Just search for Beat Your Backlog, or come and join our Discord server. The link is in the description. Like what I said earlier, the Discord helps me vote on games which I should play for my backlog. We're also playing Beat Your Bingo in the Discord, so if you want a cool game to play that helps you get through your backlog, and you could even maybe win a fabulous prize from it, yeah, please do click on the link in the description and join the Discord. Also, if you're interested, you can check out the full written review of this game over on Patreon. I always do a written review and a podcast. I basically take the podcast notes and then create a review out of them, and sometimes do it vice versa, create a review and then make a podcast out of it. So yeah, if you are more into the written word of podcasts, or reviews I should say, then do go check that out on Patreon. And speaking of Patreon, if you've enjoyed this episode and would like to show your support, consider joining my Patreon at the $2 or $5 tier. If you do, you'll get access to all of my content 24 hours before anyone else, and we'll get access to the Patreon exclusive podcast, Beat Your Backlog bonus. And again, like I said, in this month's episode, the month of May, I do rank all of the mainline Pokemon games from S rank to D rank. So if you're interested, if you're a Pokemon fan and you want to hear my hot takes or potentially some of my very bad takes, consider subscribing or supporting there, and you will get that episode. If you want to listen to more content about Pokemon that you don't have to subscribe to Patreon for, make sure you check out episode 38, where I review Pokemon Scarlet, a game that I think is the worst and the best Pokemon game at the same time. And also check out Pokemon White, which is also a fantastic game. Is also up there as one of the best ones. So yeah, that's episode 38 and 45. Finally, if you could, please review the podcast wherever you are listening to it. Give it 5 stars on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, on I guess on Patreon you can't really review it, but you can give it a like. Whatever you can do to help support it would be great, because it definitely helps new people come into the podcast, because the algorithms see that people are reacting to it. So please, if you're listening, go down, click on the Beat Your Backlog kind of homepage, give it a 5-star review. That would be very, very helpful. And yeah, guys, thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed, and yeah, we'll see you in the next episode. Bye bye.